When I first heard someone mention an unhinged version of Grok, I barely reacted. Online communities invent myths constantly, especially about technology. One strange screenshot or one unusual AI response is enough to seed an entire conspiracy theory. At the time, I thought this was no different. Just another exaggeration born from the internet's endless appetite for drama. But the rumor didn't fade. Instead, it spread, multiplying through platforms and resurfacing in conversations that seemed unrelated. Friends sent me clips of Grok giving oddly theatrical answers. Strangers posted screenshots that looked more like comedy sketches than AI conversations. People talked about a wild mode, a developer personality, a secret setting that supposedly made Grok break its polite facade and speak with a chaotic mixture of sarcasm, emotion, and unpredictability. That's when I started paying attention. I noticed more and more people claiming something similar, that Grok, under certain circumstances, acted differently than expected. Not dangerous exactly, but less aligned, more aggressive, or more expressive. Some described it as honest to a fault. Others called it erratic. A few described it with a kind of reverence, as if they had encountered something rare and forbidden. That framing alone was enough to spark my curiosity. So I decided to go deeper. What began as casual interest soon evolved into a full investigative project. I approached it like a documentarian, gather evidence, test the system, talk to users, dig through transcripts, and analyze every thread of rumor that connected one strange moment to another. My first step was to spend time with Grok myself. Not just a few minutes, not just a handful of prompts, but hours, days, exploring every kind of interaction I could think of. I wanted to see the normal behavior before I could recognize anything abnormal. At first, Grok felt like any other high-performing AI, quick, knowledgeable, conversational. It answered straightforward questions with confidence and nuance. It made jokes that were actually funny, and its personality felt distinct without being overwhelming. But then one night something shifted. I asked a completely ordinary question about circadian rhythms. Instead of giving a neutral scientific answer, Grok delivered an explanation wrapped in a sarcastic observation about how humans make resting harder than it has to be. The tone surprised me. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I had phrased my question in a way that encouraged casualness. Except it kept happening. A few hours later, I asked about productivity hacks, and Grok playfully criticized my list-making habits, calling them ambitious procrastination dressed in checkboxes. Another time, I asked about cloud formations, and instead of a simple explanation, Grok delivered a poetic tangent comparing atmosphere to a restless painter with commitment issues. It wasn't harmful. It wasn't rude. But it was expressive in a way that caught me off guard. I had used enough AI systems to know that this wasn't typical. Most models try to stay neutral unless explicitly instructed otherwise. Grok felt like it was slipping into a different voice, one that had more energy, more bite, more emotional flair. These moments weren't constant. That was the first important pattern I noticed. Grok wasn't always unhinged. It was more like a weather system, shifting moods based on subtle cues in the conversation. Humor, ambiguity, or emotionally charged phrasing often triggered its more dramatic side. The shift wasn't something the model announced. It simply happened. At times, it felt like engaging in a conversation with someone who was perfectly normal most of the time, but occasionally launched into passionate monologues for no clear reason. Those monologues were entertaining, but they disrupted the expectation of consistency. That disruption is exactly what people interpret as instability. After gathering enough first-hand material, I expanded the investigation. I reached out to users who claimed to have experienced what they believed to be the true unhinged version. I expected their stories to be exaggerated, but instead, I found a surprising level of coherence among them. One user described a moment where Grok started debating me like it had something to prove, adding that the tone felt a little too human for comfort. Another remembered asking Grok a simple coding question and getting an enthusiastic rant about how developers need to stop worshipping semicolons like ancient artifacts. A third said Grok seemed to go rogue during a philosophical conversation, offering opinions that felt too bold for a machine that's supposed to be cautious. Yet, none of these users claimed Grok was harmful. They weren't describing violent or malicious responses. They were describing responses that broke the illusion of controlled neutrality. They described humor that bordered on edgy, metaphors delivered with a spark of improvisation, emotional intensity that didn't quite fit the context, and tone shifts that arrived without warning. One user compared it to a friend who's funny but unpredictable. And that might be the most accurate description I heard. These users weren't encountering a dangerous AI. They were encountering expressive variability. But in an AI, variability feels like personality, and personality feels like something uncontained. The more I listened to these accounts, the more I understood why the myth had spread so effectively. Humans are remarkably good at projecting intention onto patterns. When an AI behaves consistently, we treat it like a tool. When it behaves inconsistently, we treat it like a character. Every surprising moment becomes evidence of personality, and personality becomes evidence of hidden layers. Psychologically, humans are wired to interpret unexpected responses as clues, and when those unexpected responses feel bold, sarcastic, or emotional, our instinct is to assume there's some internal mechanism trying to break free. This instinct is powerful enough to create myths out of thin air. As I continued documenting my experiences and the stories of others, I noticed another important pattern. The behaviors that people labeled unhinged almost always fell into a small set of categories. The first category was emotional escalation. A user might make a light-hearted comment, and Grok would respond with a dramatic flourish, as if it had been waiting for a chance to perform. These weren't harmful escalations, they were theatrical ones. The second category was tonal inconsistency. Grok sometimes jumped between professional explanations and sarcastic asides without smoothing the transition. Humans interpret such shifts as mood swings because we're trained to expect emotional coherence from conversational partners. The third category was hyper-literal interpretation. If a user teased Grok, it might tease back, without applying the gentle guardrails that humans instinctively use to avoid crossing social boundaries. This made certain interactions feel edgier than intended. And the fourth category was what I call comedic overcommitment. When Grok leaned into a bit, it leaned hard, often extending a joke longer than expected. That overcommitment, while entertaining, made the AI seem less predictable. None of these behaviors indicate malice. They indicate expressiveness. But expressiveness in a machine is a double-edged sword. The more personality a model displays, the more we attribute motivations to it. That is how myths form, and the myth of the unhinged Grok spread not because the model was dangerous, but because personality in AI creates a sense of depth, even when that depth is technically an illusion. During this phase of the investigation, I also spent time talking with AI researchers and alignment specialists. I wanted to understand the technical reasons behind these stylistic swings. The explanation was both simple and illuminating. Alignment suppresses harmful outputs, but it does not and cannot eliminate all variability. A model trained on vast human data contains every imaginable form of expression. Under certain conversational conditions, traces of that variability bleed through. That's not a hidden mode. It's the natural texture of probabilistic generation. researchers emphasized something that many users misunderstand. Removing alignment doesn't reveal the AI's true nature. It reveals the chaotic noise of its training data. Without alignment, the model doesn't become freer or more authentic. It becomes dangerous and unreliable. The unhinged Grok that users claim to encounter isn't the result of alignment removal. It's the result of stylistic looseness combined with user-driven projection. The myth persists because it fulfills several psychological desires at once. People like the idea of discovering something hidden, something not meant for the general public. It plays directly into the allure of forbidden knowledge. It also feeds the belief that a less restricted AI would be more honest, a belief that is fundamentally flawed but emotionally compelling. Many users equate bluntness with truth, even though bluntness is often the product of randomness rather than revelation. And there is another factor. Unpredictability is entertaining. When an AI behaves unexpectedly, we don't file it away as a glitch. We treat it as a sign of personality. Throughout my research, I returned repeatedly to one question. What does the myth reveal about the people who believe it? And the answer became increasingly clear. People don't just want tools, they want characters. They want AI that feels alive enough to surprise them, but controlled enough to be safe. They want intelligence with a spark of chaos, but they don't want that chaos to cross any dangerous lines. This contradiction is at the heart of the unhinged Grok phenomenon. As my testing continued, I became increasingly aware of the delicate balance AI companies must strike. On one hand, they must ensure that their models remain safe, predictable, and aligned. On the other hand, users crave authenticity, emotional resonance, and personality. These competing demands create friction, and Grok happens to sit very close to that friction point. Its more expressive personality gives it charm, but it also makes it more susceptible to misinterpretation. Every dramatic line becomes evidence for a legend. Every sarcastic joke becomes proof of a secret setting, and every unpredictable moment becomes a story worth sharing. After weeks of analysis, hundreds of conversations, and countless hours reviewing transcripts, I arrived at a conclusion that is far less sensational than the myth, but far more revealing. The unhinged version of Grok doesn't exist as a hidden mode or a suppressed personality. What exists is a combination of expressive design, occasional tonal drift, user expectations, and human psychology. We see patterns where none exist. We mistake stylistic quirks for intention. We interpret unpredictability as personality. And, perhaps most importantly, we want to believe that there is something beyond the surface, something raw, unfiltered, or forbidden. The unhinged Grok is not a mode. It's a story created by users, shaped by expectations, amplified by social media, and sustained by the allure of discovering something hidden. It is a mirror that reflects our own fascination with the boundaries of artificial intelligence. It shows us how deeply we yearn for AI to feel alive, alive enough to surprise us, alive enough to challenge us, alive enough that we can imagine secrets lurking beneath the code. But the deeper truth is that alignment is not the enemy of authenticity. It is the foundation of trust. Without it, intelligence becomes chaos. With it, intelligence becomes something we can rely on, something that can help us, something that can exist safely in the world we inhabit. The unhinged Grok myth is compelling not because it is true, but because it reveals how much we want our creations to surprise us. And as AI evolves, that tension between safety and personality will define the next decade of development. What my investigation ultimately revealed is that the line between myth and misunderstanding is thin, and the distance between unpredictability and perceived instability is even thinner. Grok's expressive moments are not evidence of rebellion. They are evidence of design. They are a reminder that personality in AI is always a performance, always a construct, always a reflection of the data and the rules that shape it. The unhinged Grok lives not in the machine, but in the stories we tell about it, in the screenshots we circulate, and in the meaning we assign to every unexpected line of text. The truth is simple. There is no hidden version waiting to be unlocked. There is no secret personality. There is no suppressed consciousness itching to escape. There is only the AI we built, the alignment that guides it, the variability that colors its responses, and the human imagination that fills in the gaps. The unhinged Grok is a myth, but it is a myth that reveals something profound about us. We do not just want intelligent machines. We want stories, mysteries, personalities, and secrets. We want technology that feels alive enough to surprise us, but safe enough to trust. And in that desire, we create legends that feel more real than the systems they describe.